Hi, my name is Vickie Fairchild. I'm excited to finally make another video. I know it's been a while, but I think all of our lives were upended by COVID and different demands that have been placed on it. During this past year, I've also returned to school to get my doctorate degree. And part of that study has caused me to reflect a lot on some of these videos and some of the things I have learned since making them, even in this short year since we started. I want to start with the realization I had last week. And I'm going to bring up two numbers. Okay, there we go. 1975 and 80%. I had learned about these two numbers previously in my bachelor's and master's degrees. I'm sure they were covered a few times, but they didn't stick with me for some reason. And when I was reading about it again last week, I was overwhelmed, and I couldn't get those two numbers out of my head. And let me explain why. 1975 is the date of the first law requiring the education of all children, including those with special needs, that was passed in the United States. 1975. Prior to that law, they estimate about 80% of children with disabilities were not receiving a free and appropriate education. 80%. Now, when I learned those numbers years ago, in my 20s, I wasn't struck by their significance. Now, when I look at that number, 1975, and I realize that I am older than the first special education law, I'm a little horrified, I'm amazed, and I understand some things that I didn't understand before. And let me tell you what I understand now. This is such a new science. Educating our students with disabilities is so new. And for me, it explains all the changes that I have seen in my very short career in how we educate students with disabilities. And as we learn, we're constantly trying to adjust. And our pendulum of best practices, our pendulum of how to serve kids swings so rapidly and so far, both directions, so quickly, that it can be a little overwhelming. We are literally building the plane. Well, not literally, but we're trying to build the plane when we fly it with regards to special education. And as we learn about more disabilities and we learn about therapies and we learn about what works and what doesn't, it can be a little overwhelming. It can be overwhelming for educators, and it can be overwhelming for parents. I think about the people, the pioneers of special education, those first teachers and school psychologists who were trying to figure out how to fit these kids in a system that previously wasn't required to educate them. Again, special education law is less than 50 years old. Now, we've come a long way. We have come a long way. We do have a ways to go. But I kind of wanted to give this perspective so that teachers and parents can understand that things are going to change. And this is good, because we need to keep learning and adapting and adjusting to what the new science and data tells us about how to educate these children. These changes can be overwhelming for special educators. I have to admit, I'll give you just one small example so you can understand what I'm talking about. In the state where I work, when I started working, we had 3 IEP forms. That's right, 1, 2, 3. 3. There were 3 types of IEP forms. There was the form where we wrote where the child was at, or the present levels. There was the form for the goals, and there was the form where we signed, and we talked about services. So it was services as signatures. 3 forms. Now, obviously, we would use multiples of Form A and B and C, but there were 3 forms. And they were written on triplicate. And we would give the pink, I think, to the parent, and the yellow stayed at the school, and the white went to the district office. Am I dating myself? But again, I want to say I'm not that old. So, so there we are, 3 forms. Now, we have, I don't even know how many forms, maybe 20 forms, 20 different forms. And teachers are creating these documents, and every time a new form comes out, or a new requirement as part of the IEP, everyone has to be retrained all over again on what to put in that section. And so it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I remember just watching these IEP documents grow from fairly simple to what is increasingly more and more complex. And it's hard. It's really hard to keep up sometimes. It's hard to keep up with just the paperwork, and then you have to keep up with what new data is telling us about teaching children. Let's go back again to this very low-tech thing, data sheet. Next time, I want you to think about these 2 numbers. Next time you're frustrated with how special ed is working, next time you get another thing that you have to do, I want you to remember how young special ed is. I am older than special education. And not too long ago, most of the children who had special needs were not being educated. I want to explain something else about that 80%. As I have looked at some of the children who have disabilities, who are now adults, when I've thought about some of those children and their childhoods, I've just been sad but grateful that we have come this far. That we have come this far. It's not as far as we need to go, but we have come this far. And I've thought about those adults who maybe had any type of a syndrome where immediately they were excluded from education, and their parents, and the lack of support they had. And I thought, those are the parents that advocated. Those are the parents that made sure that we have this law, that are continue to push the envelope, that we're the pioneers of adult programs for our adults with disabilities. And again, I've just been overwhelmed at how new it all is. So again, my message today is, when you're frustrated, I want you to give the whole system grace. The teachers grace, I want the teachers to give the parents grace, because we are all learning together. We're all learning together. And as we continue to make progress, and we continue to evaluate, and we continue to look at how we can best serve these children, we're only going to get better and better and better.